Sees Truth Channel.
Thank you for coming to Sees Truth Channel. Today's title is called Mankind. And I'm going to talk about the creation of mankind and some more information you can gather is on a couple of my other videos called Lilith and the War in Heaven, Let There Be Light, and Jesus and Lucifer. So I'd like to start at Revelation 12, verse 1 and 2. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. I believe this is a reference to Lilith, the bride that left her husband to have her own children. Revelation 12, verses 5 and 6. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto Elohim and his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So this woman was travailing to bring forth this man-child, and whenever she brought it forth, this man-child, was caught up unto Elohim and unto his throne, which I believe is allegorical to Saturn. And the woman fled into the wilderness, which is the desert, where she had a place prepared by Elohim. And they, being the Elohim, because Elohim is plural, shall feed her there 1,260 days. So what did the Elohim who took this knowledge do with this knowledge, or this child? Let's go to Genesis 1:26. And God, which I believe is the Yahweh Elohim in this particular area, said, Let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Well, it didn't happen that way, because right here, this is a question. Let us make man. Well, man was not made in Genesis 1:27. He was created. Man was made in Genesis chapter 2, which we'll get to that. So let's go to Genesis 1:27. So Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So amongst the Elohim are the ones dwelling in light and the ones dwelling in darkness. You can see this in Genesis 1, verses 3 through 5. Yahweh is in darkness and wanted to make man, and he was told no. So the light, being Christ, created man. You can get more information on my video called Let There Be Light on this particular subject. So what happened after Elohim created man in the image? Let's go to Ezekiel 28, verse 12 and 13. And this is a reference to the king of Tyrus, who I believe is Yahweh. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, which is Adonai Yahweh, actually. Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. The workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Ezekiel 28:16. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled thee with the mists of violence. So let's think in the Old Testament, who was filled with violence throughout the entire Old Testament? That would be Yahweh. And thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire, which is the cornerstone of man. Christ said, I am the cornerstone that the builders rejected. Yahweh robbed from the cornerstone of man and placed himself in the center of the cornerstone. This takes place in Genesis chapter 2. That is why man is corruptible. So once Yahweh was cast out of the garden of God, he robbed from the stones of fire. And this is what happened next. Revelation 12:9. And the great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was hurled down to the earth and his angels with him. This is your Elohim, your Yahweh Elohim on the earth. Yahweh claims this destruction that takes place in Jeremiah 4 as his, and then he blames it on the morning star because of his casting out from heaven. Isaiah 14:16 through 18. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 4 and see the destruction that takes place whenever the dragon is cast down to the earth. Now let's remember that man was already created and already had dominion. So men are watching this take place. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void. In the heavens they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of heaven were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord Yahweh, and by his fierce anger. For thus hath the Lord Yahweh said, the whole land shall be desolate. Yet will I not make a full end. So a couple of pointers. The earth was without form and void, and the fruitful place was a wilderness, and the cities were broken down. So that means there was cities, there was a fruitful place, and there was man, and there was birds in heaven. So the earth had already been created whenever the dragon was cast down to the earth. So now what happens? What is Yahweh's full end? I would say this is Yahweh's full end of mankind, as mankind was created in the image. In Isaiah 14, Yahweh says this is the destruction of Lucifer, the morning star. However, right here in Jeremiah, he is claiming this destruction himself. So does Yahweh falsely accuse the morning star? We'll get to that. Isaiah 34:11. But the cormorant, being the pelican or the Christ, and the bittern, being the rolled up, shall possess or inherit the land. The owl, being the dawn, and the raven, being the dusk, shall dwell in it. So the night and day shall dwell in it. And he, being the cherub that covers the dragon that was cast down to the earth, shall stretch out upon it a cord of confusion, which is a cord of unreality and futile things. And he shall also give it the stones of emptiness, which is the cornerstone of emptiness. Yahweh is the builder who rejected the cornerstone of Christ. And right here you can see it, the stones of emptiness. So up here, it says that the covering cherub robbed from the cornerstone of man. And right here, we can see that the cherub that covers also gave us stones of emptiness and a false reality. So it all started after the dragon was cast out, whenever Yahweh started creating and making the land on his own, and that is in Genesis 2:4. These are the generations of the heaven and of the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the heavens and the earth. So this is the particular time of the heaven and the earth when they were created, and the day that the Lord God made the heavens and the earth. Not when Elohim created the heaven and the earth, but whenever Yahweh made, or I should say remade, the heaven and the earth. And here's the proof of that remaking. Amos 7:1. Thus hath the Adonai Yahweh shewed unto me, and behold, he formed the grasshoppers in the beginning of the shooting up of the latter growth. That would be the later growth, the second growth. And lo, it was the latter growth which was after the king's mowings. Well, what mowings is he speaking of? The mowings he's speaking of is the mowings from Jeremiah chapter 4. After the mowings of Jeremiah chapter 4, this here took place in Isaiah 34, and now we're to the point where Yahweh creates and makes his own false reality. So what does the Elohim think about this, what the Yahweh has done? Romans 1:23, and they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Who did this? Well, that would be the Yahweh. Because as you can see up here in Jeremiah 4, whenever the Yahweh came down to the earth, he destroyed the birds, he destroyed the man, he destroyed the fruitful place, and he destroyed the cities. Well, down here, this confirms that once Yahweh destroyed them, he remade them, and he changed the glory of them and the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Mankind is now corruptible because they possess the stones of emptiness. The glory means the shining part of a star, like the morning star that was cut into pieces and thrown down to the earth in Isaiah 14. It also speaks of this light that fell down from heaven in Genesis 1, verse 3 through verse 5. There is a double creation going on here. So let's review. A woman wanted to have children of her own. Whenever she had this child, the Elohim took this child and up to Elohim's throne. Elohim created man and told Yahweh he could not make man, which I'm sure made Yahweh mad because mankind was created in the image. So Yahweh has to serve the image. So Yahweh became violent. And he stole from the stones of fire. And Yahweh, the great dragon, was hurled down to the earth, along with Satan and his angels. And a great destruction took place. And all of the creation of Genesis 1 was destroyed. Yahweh speaks of what he's going to do and what happens. He will stretch a line of confusion, of unreality and futile things, and stones of emptiness upon the earth. He does this starting in the Garden of Eden, where he creates Adam and Eve. He confirms it whenever he confirms that there was a destruction before his creation, that he created the latter growth. And it was the latter growth that changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. So this is my study and my finds on the creation of mankind. I thank you. I ask you to please share, like, and subscribe. Have a great day.